Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankoff II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down, you absolutely should be. Also, shout out to my guy, Harry Moroz, who is contributing over at the Motor City Hoops Substack. He has his podcast, The Order of the Blazing Horse. There's all sorts of great Pistons content out there. Pistons Jack, Koo with Locked On and his Substack. You guys got to be taking it all in. But special shout out, make sure you're subscribed and reading all of Omari's work at the Free Press. And a little bit of bias, free subscription to the Motor City Hoop Stack. All things free. Video breakdowns, Harry's Slept On Pistons, have some other contributors over there. My notes and analysis. I'll get back into some video breakdowns once we get into the playoffs. So lots of great stuff out there. But O2, I got to admit, Denver's only like 4 hours away, and word on the street is they could use a head coach and a general manager. Like, I don't know if anybody up in Denver knows where I'm at or the credentials, but maybe I can get an interview or something.
I could put in a good word for you. This is to me, this is a match made in heaven.
Yeah,
you're already Coach Bryce. It's already in your name. So
yeah,
to me, that's all you need.
Let me know what's up. That seriously? I literally went, oh my gosh. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, O2. Order these things in terms of the shockiness of them. Luka trade, Jenkins fired, Malone and Booth fired. Order those for me. Go 3-1. Which was the least shocking to most shocking?
Taylor Jenkins, least shocking because there had been some friction there for a while. He had to fire all of his assistants last summer. So I think it was more so surprising that it happened with 9 games left, but not necessarily that it happened in general. Calvin Booth and Mike Malone at the same time is second most shocking, because how many teams are firing their coach and GM, 3 games before the playoffs. And I know Denver's lost 4 or 5 straight. They've kind of been in dire straits for a while, but number 2. But Luka will always be number 1. I literally, everybody just stopped for a minute. There's no way this is a real tweet. And after that, I feel like that almost kind of dulled the edge of the Mike Malone firing. That's shocking, but I can believe it because I've seen crazier things happen. So the Luka trade is the crazy transactions to end all transactions. I can't see anything topping that anytime soon. Yeah,
that would be my list as well. The Jenkins thing was surprising, but honestly, the more I listened to some podcasts like the Hoop Collective and stuff like that, it seemed like there was a little bit, and they had made him redo his staff this past offseason and all of that. So honestly, I think some people knew that there was a chance. I think it was just the timing of that one. This, like you mentioned, this Malone Booth thing with a week left to go in the season is all truly kind of crazy stuff with where they're at. It kind of hit me this morning. This Nuggets team is, they could end up in the play-in still, Omari, which is crazy. So it just seems like a weird time to be messing with all of this. So that will be, but yeah, Luka getting traded was, like you said, there's only so many things that truly make you think that Shams got. When Malone news came out, I didn't think that Shams had gotten hacked.
No.
When Luka got traded, I legit thought that he had gotten hacked. So I think that speaks to the level of surprise.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just looking at the Western Conference right now, like you mentioned, you have 6, 7 teams that are all right next to each other. It might be more than that. It might be everybody, outside of OKC and whoever. I don't even know who is number 2 right now. But
the Rockets solidly in number 2.
Yeah, which is crazy. And then it's everybody else. So you would think that teams would not want to rock the boat too much, given that literally anything could play out over the next, we have 5 days left in the season. So to fire your coaches when you're that close to the playoffs, to me, speaks to just the level of pressure in that conference right now. Meanwhile, you have the Pistons sitting pretty top 6, locked up, no coach drama, no GM drama. It's just stark differences on both sides of the coast right now.
Yeah, just real quick, just some standings in the West, because I'm sure we'll talk the Eastern Conference standing. The Thunder have it locked up. Houston looks like it's close to having the 2 seed locked up. Then the Lakers, they're a game and a half up on the Nuggets. The Nuggets are 47-32. And then 0-2, the next 4 teams, Clippers, Warriors, Wolves, Grizzlies, 46-32. all of them. So, I mean, it is a tight race right there from 4 to 8. So quick shout out here from Diego. What up, though, from Spain? Love it. We continue to kind of expand our countries here on the Pistons poll. So we appreciate it. Thank you for everybody joining us here live. Make sure you guys are active in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking, what's up as we get into this. And if you're watching after the fact, thank you as well. Rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment, all of that. We like to do vibes checks around here at O2, and for the most part this year, those vibe checks have been very positive. But with 3 games to go, seems like things are a little antsy here in the 3-1-3. Detroit has lost 4 of 5. Going back to the Minnesota game, they lost by 19. After that, they lost to OKC by 16, knocked off the Raptors by 12. And in the last 2, a 6-point loss to the Grizzlies. And then on Monday night, the 10-point loss to the Kings. What are the vibes right now, O2?
Yeah, I would say like maybe mild concern. Like there's no panic or anything. There's no sense of like, oh, this momentum we've been on has been knocked askew and we can't get back on track. But there's an awareness that they could tighten up with 3 games left, obviously. I wrote about it today, but like over that 5-game stretch, they're like 20th in defensive rating. And on the season, I think they're like 10. Like they're pretty high, and they're like number 3 since New Year's. So, they've been a top defense and that's slipped. So, I mean, you look at who they lost to. They lost to Minnesota on the road in the game. They kind of got blown up in the second quarter with that brawl, and they were up 16. So, that's a game that they potentially could have won that just kind of got, snatched away. OKC's OKC. Like, they've destroyed everybody this season. Like, I don't think there's any shame in losing to OKC, especially when you don't have Cade Cunningham. Like, it's more so the last 2 when you get some guys back from injury and suspension. And, the Memphis Grizzlies didn't have Ja. You look at these games, like maybe you could kind of get back on track, and they still haven't quite been there. So maybe it's the last 2 at home that cause more concern. But as a whole, like, I think you look at what the team's kind of been dealing with injury-wise and suspension-wise, and it makes sense that there would be some slippage.
I want to talk about that just a little bit, and I actually did a little research today that's a little long-term looking that I just want to throw out there for people before we get back into this. But YouTube user says, vibes are still fine for me, going to the playoffs healthy, beat the Bucks to end the season. And I do want to kind of talk about that, like what's most important down the stretch. Let me ask you this, O2. Against the Grizzlies, Cade Cunningham's on the floor. Who's the best player on the court between Detroit and Memphis? I mean, it would definitely be between Cade, Dez, and Jaren Jackson Jr., right? You agree?
Yeah, I would think so. Like, really, it would be between Cade and Jaren. And Jaren's a defensive player of the year. Like, he's gotten better offensively every single season. Like, he's absolutely a cornerstone player. But I think it's between him and Cade, and I think Cade edges out Ja simply because not only is Cade an offensive engine, but he's giving you something on defense, too. And, like, that's just, like, Ja's just more of a spry 6'2", 6'3". It's just certain stuff Cade could do that Ja can't. So, I mean, I think you can make an argument for Cade, absolutely. I just think Jaren, even after winning DPO-wise, still one of the more underrated guys in this league.
Yeah, so that's my thing is, let's just say Cade is. Let's give it to Cade.
Yeah.
But then the thing is, they have Jaren Jackson Jr., and then you go to the next player, and it's Desmond Bane. And then my thing is with the Sacramento Kings, they have DeRozan, LaVine, and Sabonis. And so, listen, I love Ausar, and I think he's going to be awesome. But we're talking about guys that are established veterans in this league, where Ausar is in year 2 coming off an offseason where he didn't get an offseason and, had a late start to the year. My point is, this has been an incredible season for the Pistons, Omari, but there's going to be games where they can't match the other team's number 2 when the other team's number 2 gets it going, let alone in the Kings case. Like, I think Sabonis had a quiet triple-double because LaVine and my thing was, DeRozan kept them in that game when Detroit was trying to blow it open. And then when DeRozan had to go sit down, they had LaVine to go crazy in that moment. And then all along the way, they had Sabonis, creating and scoring and rebounding and all of that. And so these 2 games more for me just showed, and this is okay, I'm not trying to move the goalpost on this season. It just shows me that the next most important piece for this team, Omari, is finding the number 2 guy. And maybe that guy's on the roster, maybe he's not. But Cade is the dude. And we've seen that. All NBA caliber player. What these two things reminded me is they have to find who the number 2 guy is, whether that's J.I., whether it's Ron, or whether it's Ausar. And I wonder if we won't see that play out in the playoffs also.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough that when you lose J.I. the way you did, like right as the team's starting to find itself and, gain the confidence and momentum that they have now, because he potentially could be that number 2 guy, or at least something close enough to it, to where if a game does just kind of become a shootout like it did, last night against the Kings, like you have somebody else who could step up. And like for the Pistons, you have Cade. Some nights it's going to be THJ, some nights it's going to be B's, but you have role players.
Tobias
who are not
Harris
always,
has done it. Tobias has done it at times, right? But it's been a revolving door of the number 2.
Exactly. Like you don't know who it's going to be on any given night, and it kind of just comes down to those guys getting hot. And that's their role. Like that's not an issue with them. It's just, you don't want them to be number 2. You want them to be playing off of your number 1 and your number 2. And like, it's just evident in games like last night that the Pistons have a weakness there. Like, honestly, I would say their offense has punched above its weight class overall this season. Like, I want to say that they're 14 in offensive rating, which is, slightly above average, obviously. So that just speaks to, how well the pieces fit offensively, and how much Cade has lifted this team. But there's always a pretty clear difference between, the Pistons against teams that have 1 guy and, against teams that have 2 or more guys. And if the defense isn't clicking like it wasn't last night, then, things could flip against them pretty quickly. So it goes back to defense, but it also just shows long-term that you do have to find that number 2 at some point.
And we're going to get back to this, but I spent my time doing some research today, so I want to talk about it. I went back and looked at the last 10 years of conference finalist teams. So that's 40 different teams. Because I just wanted to get a feel for what does this look like to really compete. So O2, I already told Wes these numbers, so he can't guess. What do you think the average points per game for a number team's number 1 scoring option has been over the last 10 years? So 40 teams in the conference finals. What do you think the average scoring points per game for the number 1 option on a team is?
Yeah, I would guess around 25.
Perfect. 25.8. Yeah. And so here's what's crazy. You know what Cade Cunningham is averaging right now?
25.8.
Yeah,
25.6 or 8 or something like that. Yeah.
25.9. So it's like, okay, that matches the number 1. Here's where I really went into it. I felt like Cade was probably putting up the numbers. What do you think the number 2 option on average per game for those 40 teams?
I would guess around like 19.9 or something like that, like right around 20.
Not bad. 20.8. So
20.8. Okay.
To that point, J.I. was averaging 17.6 before he went out. Beasley averages 16.2. All I'm saying here is, and listen, there was some outlier teams, right? Like the lowest number is actually 14.5. And then you have the Hawks teams. Yeah, the 14-15 Hawks, if you remember those, 16.7 was the highest number on that team. But they had 4 All-Stars on that team.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, from the mid 2000s to the mid 2010s, there's going to be some teams that were barely cracking 20 points for sure.
Yeah. So there's some another outlier team is the Monty Williams Suns team. Devin Booker averaged 25.6, but number 2 scorer on that team was 16.4, and they were 5th in offensive rating that season. All I'm saying is sometimes when they lose these games that really turn into offensive battles, and some people may point to defense, like that's the answer, but it's because they don't have that night in and night out number 2 guy. And again, I'm not saying that J.I., Holland, Ausar may not be those guys. It just, when I did the data, it's like, okay, it looks like they probably need a guy that's going to be close to 20 points per game to do this. And right now they don't. And that's okay. It was just kind of interesting little exercise and data that I put together.
Yeah. And there's probably been like 5 or 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 games since J.I.'s injury where I thought, man, if the Pistons had J.I., they had a chance to win this one. So let's say you get 4 or 5 of those games, now you're flirting with a 50-win season. So it really does show it's right there. And and that's something, and, we'll talk about this a lot, obviously, in the future, but how do you approach that? Like, when you decide you want that guy, and, does J.I. in year 4, basically, is he somebody that could fill those shoes as well and pick up where he left off?
Yeah, no, I agree. It was interesting. I also looked like how many, like, defensive-wise, some of that stuff, which was interesting also. We can get more into that down the road. Some trends from this. Ausar, obviously with Harris out, we've seen him in a little bit of a different mold and a different role. So over the last 5, he's averaged 15, 7, 3.5 on 51, 20, 82 with 3.2 stocks. What have you kind of thought about Ausar's role over this stretch of games, specifically with Harris out? He's starting at the 4 and playing in that role.
One thing I like about Ausar is, like, outside of him being opportunistic on offense, like, he's also very patient, and, he knows that, his shooting could be a liability. And I think he's been pretty smart and, like, knowing when to attack and, just trying to find those gaps. And there's probably once or twice a game where he kind of gets caught, not quite in, like, no man's land, but, he's figuring out the best shot, and he knows he could finish over some bigger defenders with that push shot. So he's figuring things out. Like, he's figuring out how to be efficient. And I feel like he approaches the game in a way where he's prioritizing that efficiency while still making a scoring impact. He's been dabbling with shooting threes a little bit more. There was a bit of a drop mid-season where he wasn't taking them. I think he knocked one down last night. Like, that still hasn't really been a big part of his arsenal. But if you're not going to shoot threes, you want to see him fill the gaps elsewhere. And, I feel like he's done that. He's always been good at the rim, but, he's also, found opportunities to attack space, not let the shooting be a complete liability. And, I think week by week, it's just been slight improvements in that area. You talk about his efficiency, what he's averaging, like 16 a game, like over their last stretch. There's definitely been growth there this season.
Yeah, I'm really interested here with him. My only thing with him at the 4 is sometimes then it makes it hard with matchups in terms of putting him on perimeter players, just because you have to have the other guy. If a team, like last night, they got away with it, right? Trey Lyles was playing. Even if Keegan Murray was in the lineup, you can slide Cade down to that matchups against some teams. It was fine last night, but some teams are going to have a 4, quote unquote 4, where if Ausar is your biggest non-center, he's going to have to match up with that guy, and you don't necessarily always want that. So, I mean, it'll be interesting how that plays out and where he, like, settles into, and that's a bigger roster kind of decision. The one thing I want to say is, listen, I love when Ausar pushes transition 0-2. But what I found is I kind of want him getting out and running more. Like, I think I almost forgot how athletic he is and how good of a play finisher he can be in transition situations as well. So I hope Detroit kind of keeps that in the back of their mind of, yes, this is great with his athleticism and defensive rebounding. He can push pace, but I also love the idea of the ball being in one of the best players in the league's hands in Cade Cunningham, with one of the most athletic players in the league, Ausar Thompson, running the wing. Or, something else he's done even in the half court is getting some post position. He gets interesting matchups throughout a game where I think if he could just get a post up catch and finish, that could be a nice way to get a bucket or two easily throughout a game also.
Yeah, he's figuring things out. I think one thing that will help him too is just, J.I. next season, being somebody else who could match his speed and transition and look for those opportunities will, relieve Ausar some of the ball handling, that he's had to take on. And also, like, I'd be curious to see, how the shoulder-Ausar connection grows as well, because it seems like a lot of Ausar's assists, if they're not coming from Cade, they're coming from Jalen Duren. Like, I actually feel like Jalen Duren and Ausar kind of developed something of a chemistry there. So, yeah, that's something Ausar has in his toolkit, but I agree that, like, I do kind of miss seeing the high-flying alley-oops he had, it seems like, more frequently last season.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a fine line of, okay, do you need the ball in Cade's hands? How much do you let Ausar explore that space? How much does JD explore that space? JD a little bit more, I think, in the half court. I've lost all interest in him grabbing and going in the full court, but I do appreciate what he's doing in the half court and how much he orchestrates offense that way. And maybe we can stay on the bigs after this short break. We've seen them at times struggle with some big lineups, some really good offensive rebounding teams in this league, even though we've seen growth and a lot of really good play from JD and Stu. But we'll talk about the big guys right after this.
All right, we're back with segment 2. first off topic question. Looks like you're growing the beard out, Bryce. I'm, like what's going on with the beard here?
No, it's not like a conscious decision. It's more of a lazy decision, Omari. I mean, here's my thing. Nobody's going to see me until Summer League. Like, truly, I'm not going anywhere. So I go to school. I teach 12, 13, 14-year-olds. I mean, they make fun of me because I'm bald anyway. Like, it's not going to matter what my beard is. The only thing that would make me keep it tighter is if my wife came home and was like, hey, that's gotten out of control. And so it's mostly a lazy thing of just not worried about it until Summer League. Summer League will have me trimming it down because I'll actually get out in public around people and all of that and look a little bit more presentable. I will say, can't really see on this stream, but the gray hair does show out a little bit more when I let it get this long.
No, I'm saying you should keep the beard going like all the way through Summer League. I'm trying to see where this goes.
I've had it a little longer than this, but this is getting there for sure.
All right, cool. No, I was just curious. Is Randy pro beard? This is my last beard question before we get back on topic.
She's cool with it, I guess. She's never said otherwise. So I mean, I hope so, right? I hope so.
Man, I can't grow a beard like that. Like I have this, but I don't have this. So I'm just jealous is what I'm saying. Anyway, let's talk about the bigs. So the Pistons, they were out rebounded by 20 against Memphis on Friday. Zach Edey, I think, had 21 rebounds. Jaren had 11. And then last night, I think they were minus 18. Well, not minus 18 on the offensive rebounds, but they gave up 18 offensive rebounds. Now, that's not an indictment on the bigs. Obviously, Duran missed, Friday's game, and, they've been missing Tobias. But I guess beyond that, just kind of what do you make of the rebounding disparity and even with guys like Ausar, why haven't they been able to make up that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're a good rebounding team, right? You just look at offensive rebound percentage, B-Ball Reference have them 10th, defensive rebound percentage has them 9th. I think what they are is they're a really good rebounding team. I don't think they're an elite rebounding team. And it seems like a lot of times when I'm taking notes throughout a game, I'm like, man, they're kind of getting crushed on the boards. They're kind of it seems like if I look at the other team, it's a team that's top 5 in offensive rebound percentage, or has a specific guy that's really good at it. So I think it's a thing, Omari, where they're good on the boards, but I don't know that they're elite on the boards. And I think that really shows up whenever they play those level of teams that are kind of the elite tier in the NBA.
Yeah. And not that Tobias Harris needed pro Tobias propaganda or anything. I think we all agree that he's been really good for this team. But that's kind of what I've been thinking over the last 2 games. It's man, they really, really missed Tobias Harris up front. And he's a good rebounder, but I think the difference in these last 2 games is just how much he's given them, at the 4, especially when you have Ausar at the 3. I feel like it's that trio that's really made a difference for this team. And they missed Tobias. I'm curious to see how they handle that going into the playoffs, with 3 games left. That Hill's been kind of nagging them for a bit. So, do you shut them down? Do you just ride the rebounding deficit out?
Tobias is a great call because especially on the defensive boards, listen, JD, even if you look per 100 possessions, JD is heads above anybody else. And then Isaiah Stewart, as you would imagine, Paul Reed's there, but it is Tobias next. And actually the next guy, O2, is Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham's been very good. Those 2 guys specifically are guys that are really good on the defensive boards. And it probably doesn't show up as much because they're not as impactful on the offensive boards. For example, Ausar is below both of those guys in defensive rebounds per 100 possessions. And Ausar is actually tied with Ron Holland and barely above Simone Fontecchio when you look at defensive rebounding. Now, when you look at offensive rebounding, which is what most people normally kind of recognize, which makes sense, obviously JD, incredible. Isaiah Stewart, Ausar is right up there with Isaiah Stewart in terms of offensive boards. But when Ausar is at the 3 and you have Tobias on the court, then that's a really good defensive rebounding lineup and especially Cade, right? Cade missed some games as well. So I think it is a little bit lineup where, listen, Tobias, the contract, the production, the 3-point shooting, whatever. I find myself, especially this year, watching what he's capable of doing, even at his age, just loving that archetype. I just can't imagine many NBA teams that don't have a wing/forward, whatever you want to call him, that can play for you because of the rebounding, the matchup versatility, all of those things that he provides. I think it's very important. We'll talk about this later. We had a comment. I think it's very important to get the long-term answer at that position. If it is Ausar, great, but if not, you got to find someone in the same ilk.
Yeah, I mean, that's become a non-negotiable, right? Because essentially since Jeremy Grant, a big need for this team has been just like an athletic four that can, okay, granted, Jeremy Grant's not the greatest rebounder, so that's something you're getting, from Tobias Harris that you weren't with that. But, just like that multifaceted type of, big forward, right? And I think this season has shown that these two, outside of certain matchups, is probably much more effective at the 5 than he is at the 4. And we've got to have to reverse. Not that we ever disagreed with that, but I think we've got to have to reverse our understanding of, where he fits positionally, and that, rebounding wise, you probably are giving up something, with him and Duran. So yeah, I'm curious to see how they go about that. Like, Tobias is a guy that's been so important to this team that I wouldn't be shocked if he's here beyond his contract, but obviously beyond next season, that's something that they have to address.
Yeah, Jeremy definitely wasn't the defensive rebounder that Harris is. It's definitely a different level, but Jeremy Grant was similar in terms of he was a better defensive rebounder than offensive rebounder. So if you just look at straight rebounding numbers, offensive rebounds don't really elevate his numbers, but defensively, it's just kind of the archetype. So to like Mr. Ray's point, I wish we had a first round pick this year. Adding Rasheer Fleming or Carter Bryant would be awesome at the 4. Yeah, those are the archetype of players that I'm talking about. Rasheer in particular, Carter Bryant as well, especially as he kind of fills out. I will say, I think Carter Bryant ends up going in the lottery, so I don't think Detroit probably would have had. Rasheer Fleming will actually be interesting. I have him as a mid-first round pick. I'm higher on him than most. If he falls into the late 20s, we've seen Detroit move up into the first round. I mean, if a player like that Trajan just said, hey, this is a really good long-term fit for us, there's no reason that they couldn't get up into the first round. I will give you a team right now. The Brooklyn Nets have 2 first-round picks, at 25 and 26, 26, 27. So teams that want to get back up into the first, I think will have a trade partner in the Nets, because Brooklyn also has 2 first-round picks before those 2. So Detroit could do it if somebody falls, whether it's a Rasheer Fleming or something like that.
While we're talking about first-round picks,
yes,
let's acknowledge that by clinching the playoffs, they officially got off of the obligation that not got off of it. They fulfilled the obligation they have to the Minnesota Timberwolves dating all the way back to 2020 when, they traded, a first-round pick to Houston for Isaiah Stewart. So, they no longer have a pick deficit, and that's just kind of something you look at, going into this offseason. You have all your first-round picks available. Now you may be able to actually add a pick surplus, right? Not just to this draft, but, I'm curious to see if there's anything else that they could do, because Trajan kind of alluded to that, during the trade deadline. There just weren't really those opportunities to add that type of draft capital, and they settled for a second-round pick. So a little bit off topic, but I did want to acknowledge that 5-year obligation. I think that pick's changed hands 3 times.
Oh man, yeah.
They're finally off of it. It's done. Pistons are no longer bound by step-in rule, and I'm curious to see how that changes their offseason, if it does at all.
Once the pick is made,
yeah.
They're no longer bound by that rule. Yeah, I mean, that goes back so far. I wasn't doing a podcast when that trade was made. 02. I was not doing Motor City Hoops did not exist when the trade was made. It started up a little bit after, and then I had to play catch up. But yeah, it's crazy. We don't have to remember top whatever protected, or, if they wanted to make a move, now they can trade, like you mentioned, as many picks as they want and all of that. The other thing is, the pick acquired in the Jeremy Grant trade will convey this year as well for the Detroit Pistons. That one, oh man, I was looking at it the other day. That one will go to, Brooklyn. Yeah, that's right. The Nets got it in the Mikal Bridges trade for the Knicks whenever that ended up that was part of the Jalen Duren trade, I think, right? That's how they landed Jalen Duren. So it's kind of fun whenever all of these things start to come together. Caleb says, hey, one of my my first catching y'all live on my TV rather than my phone or iPad. Caleb, I'm going to school tomorrow and telling my students that their teacher is famous, that he is on TV, so they better be respectful with that. Real quick here, we mentioned Ausar. So Wes said over the stretch of OKC, Toronto, Memphis, where they got beat on the boards, Ausar had 8, 7, and 11, Omari. So that would be 26 rebounds total. You want to guess how many offensive rebounds he had of those 26, though?
I would guess at least 10 were offensive rebounds.
Yeah, so...
I don't know the exact number, though.
Yeah, he had 18 defensive, so 8 offensive rebounds. So defensive rebounds, he went 5, 5, and 8, which isn't bad, but to the point, 8 is actually really good. But Tobias is at 5, so he's hitting that. But then who's replacing Ausar's normal defensive rebounds? It's Schroeder in this case has been essentially inserted in the starting lineup over this last couple stretch. So it is just something that, that's where the lineups get interesting, right? As we move forward through things. Talked a little bit about Tobias. Any ideas on the health, the situation, how it's going? I will just say, complete outsider, it made me nervous that he came back for one game and then had to leave, and you could kind of see that it was bothering him. Achilles, heel things, whatever it is, always make me nervous, especially someone his age. But there's no question they're missing him and would miss him if he's not able to come back for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's tough because Tobias, I think before this stretch, I'd only missed 2 games this season, and he's somebody that's always been pretty durable. So anytime it's Achilles, anything, you always want to be careful and, not push it more than you need to. But I believe he's missed 5 of their last 6. And as you mentioned, he came back against OKC and he ended up leaving with 7 minutes left in the third just because it flared back up again. So, with 3 games stuff, it's fair to wonder, do you just shut him down and keep him fresh for the playoffs? Just going back to the standings battle, you don't want to you still want to build some momentum going into the season. You don't want to just fold and be like, okay, we're just going to shut down and, take our licks and prepare for the playoffs. You don't want to do that, but you do kind of have to weigh, the health of guys for the playoffs versus, the upside of, trying to catch Milwaukee for the 5th seed. Because it's at the point now to where if the Pistons lose one more game, Milwaukee gets it. So I was talking to Wes about this beforehand, and, if I misquote this, please correct me. But if the Pistons win all 3, including their last 2 over Milwaukee, then they can move up to 5. So you have an outside shot, but long term, you probably want to make sure, Tobias and his heel is good. You've got 11 days. We're recording this on April 8th. So you've got 11 days until the playoffs. So you would hope that a week and a half is enough time for, whatever the cause is for it to calm down and him to get back right.
That's what's interesting, right? They get 3 more games. Every team plays on Sunday. Every team's off Monday. The play-in goes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. They're going to get almost a week off. I keep saying, hey, they need to have a couple really good games for momentum. And I still do think that's important. If they lost 3 in a row and, went, 1-7 over their last 8, I don't think that would be a great way to end the year, right? I don't think the vibes would be great in that situation. But at the end of the day, you have a whole week to regroup and get things figured out. And if they won 8 in a row to end the season, you're going to lose that momentum too, because you're going to take a whole week off and you actually get a chance to practice and do some things. And so I think it kind of changes that. I still think it would be good. Let me ask you this, because I see a lot of, I don't want to get into what are the Detroit Pistons trying to do, because I've seen people pretty adamant both ways that they are people kind of saying, hey, they're definitely trying to match up with the Knicks, and other people saying they're definitely not trying to match up with the Knicks. I don't want to get into what we think the Pistons want. What do you think, Omari? What would you prioritize right now? Do you think they need to build some momentum? Is it all about health? Should they be playing for a matchup? Do you think one of these matchups is so much better than the other that they should be trying to kind of find their way and navigate that to get either the Knicks or the Pacers? Yeah,
I think when it comes to Tobias, I'm being as cautious as possible. There's just no reason to, risk his health over what are essentially meaningless regular season games, just to be completely frank, right? I know people you lose 4 or 5, you don't want to go into the playoffs losing 7 of 8 or whatever it would be at that point. More than likely you're going to play New York. So I would assume you absolutely do everything you can to, make it a 3-1 series against the Knicks. Just if there's some momentum there, I think if you beat the Knicks and then you end up dropping to the Milwaukee, now you though you just beat the Knicks 3 times in a row, twice at their place. So, maybe there's momentum and confidence to be built there. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, like, I don't know if you could even build true momentum in the regular season at this time of year. I feel like basketball gets kind of weird in late March, April, when, like, even if guys aren't per se injured and on the report, they're still banged up and sore, maybe being managed in some ways behind the scenes. Like, you just see, like, the stakes just change this late in the season. Some teams are looking forward, like, whatever it is. I don't think how teams play this late in the year is indicative of how they're going to play in the playoffs. So, no, you don't want to drop that many games. You don't want to lose steam after, what's been an overachieving season. But, yeah, I mean, at some point, you do have to make a judgment call and say, we're here, we're going to the playoffs. Let's make sure we do everything possible to make sure we're ready for game one.
That's where I'm at. It was funny. Like, I couldn't even tell you what the Pistons record is right now, because at a certain point, I stopped keeping track. It was like, they're in the playoffs. That's all I care about. They're probably not getting to 4. And at this point, I don't think they can at all. And for me, if I'm them, and then specifically just as I was looking, I don't care whether it's the Pacers or the Knicks. Now, I've mentioned, I think it would be awesome if it was the Knicks. If I had a choice, I would choose the Knicks because of the stage, because I think the data collection would be better in terms of Ausar having to guard an all-NBA guard in Jalen Brunson, Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart having to guard an all-NBA stretch big in Karl Anthony Towns, and a team I think would be very interesting to see how they try to guard Cade Cunningham. But that's just like, I just think for data collection, that would be fun. In general, my focus right now, if I'm Detroit, is health and getting individual players in a groove. This team has been so consistent with their roster. Even with Dennis Schroeder, he's gotten, 26 games with Detroit. I think he's got integrated enough. Like, everybody understands how to play off of him. He understands how to play with them. To me, it's okay. Like, I watched Cade Cunningham. What are your thoughts on Cade Cunningham since he's returned? Because my thoughts are he's getting to his spots easily. It's just going to come down to whether or not he makes shots. The three-pointer looks a little bit flat. We've seen that from Cade when he's returned from long stretches. That's all I care about with Cade, was get him back in a groove. Can he get to his spots? Can he get in a flow? Okay, perfect. I think he looks fine in regards to what I want to see from him, knowing and expecting he'll ratchet it up, especially defensively, come playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, against the Kings, he had a pretty efficient 35. The playmaking wasn't quite there, but a lot of that was just, people bricking shots. Like, it wasn't like his playmaking was just, worse than it usually is. I thought that was just one of those nights where he got it going, but, like, 3 guys on the other team are on absolute heaters. And Zach LaVine is like going for the points record at the LCA. Like, I looked at it, like he put up like, I think he put up close to 50, like, their first game last season there. And then he had 43 earlier this season. So, like, I don't know what that's all about with him. But I mean, Cade was a little bit rusty against Memphis. He looked better last night. Assuming he plays the last 3 games, and I'm sure he'll play at least 2 of them. There's no reason to think that he'll like fall off, right? And I'm sure he wants to get into a rhythm and, kind of keep going after missing 6 games, going into the postseason. So, like, even though they lost, I thought his performance against Sacramento was encouraging.
I agree. And that's my thing, is I didn't want them to go in the playoffs without him having seen the court, right? Like, I wanted him to get on the court. And I mean, he's averaged 6 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 3 turnovers on 49% from the field, 30% from 3, but it's 10 attempts. It's like 1 more make and it's 40%. But he also, the thing with Cade is he's gotten to the free throw line 18 times in those 2 games. I think that's telling in terms of him drawing fouls. Now he's only 72%. Again, I feel like maybe he's getting his legs back, but I feel comfortable. Like you said, I don't care if he plays all 3 games, 2 of 3. If that's what he feels like he needs, then great. And then he's going to get a whole week off to get his legs. With Tobias, it's the same thing. If rest is the answer, I understand that. I thought times where he's missed a few games and come back is when he's looked the most spry for him. And we may see that. Like, I'll be honest, the guys I think that maybe could use this is Schroeder has fallen a little bit for me, and Simone Fontecchio. I think it would be awesome I would just love for them to be able to go into a game and say, hey, you're going to take 10 threes tonight. You just keep shooting until you find your rhythm. I don't know if they'll be able to afford to do that. I think they could use Fontecchio in the playoffs, but right now, I don't know. I don't know how solid he is in the rotation. I think he only played 8 minutes last night, O2.
Yeah. I would put Ron Holland in that group too, just because he's been such a spark plug for this team. And, especially if you decide to shut down Tobias, then, you're probably going to want at least one of Ron or, Tech even if you shorten your rotation to like 8 guys, you still want one of those guys to be able to come in and give you some good minutes if needed. So I agree. Like that last game in Milwaukee, I would just say, hey, Tech, go out and just take 23s, like just do everything you can to get into a rhythm. I tell Ron, hey, you're playing 32 minutes tonight. So, go out, try to get a career high, do whatever. If there's one thing you could build momentum, even if it's a loss, just getting some of those role guys going, taking advantage of the time you do have to give them some minutes that they may not get otherwise could be valuable for them.
Yeah. To me, it's just like, I'm not saying they shouldn't want to win. I'm not saying they should lose on purpose. I'm just saying I would understand if their goal is to get each individual player and the team collectively into the best possible place when the games end on Sunday to go into the 5 days off for the first round series against whoever it is without caring that much whether that ends up being the 5 seed against the Pacers or the 6 seed against the Knicks. Let's go to a short break. When we come back, we do have some questions. If you're here with us live, go ahead and drop those in the comments. Before we do that, O2, I want to get your thoughts on Marcus Sasser's play. Before we get to that, we'll get your thoughts on Sasser right after this.
All right, we are back with our third and final segment, and we're going to talk about Marcus Sasser briefly before moving on to a few of the questions you all had. So go ahead and get your questions in down. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I feel like Sasser's been really good. He's understood his role, like spark plug off the bench. He's been thrusted into that role kind of, midway through the season after not playing too much. And I'm looking at his percentages now. He is shooting 47% overall, 39% from 3 this season. His role, of course, has declined a little bit since Cade came back. But if there's one thing he needs to do, it's come in and be able to get buckets immediately. And I feel like he's done that for him with some consistency.
Yeah, so over the last 7 games he's played 7 of 8. He's averaged 11 points on 50, 82, just over 2 assists, 1.4 turnovers. I think the thing with Sasser is, and he could still grow, but I think if there's one thing you can trust is he's going to come in and he can get you buckets, and he can do it in a variety of ways. I'm interested with him moving forward is what the role ends up being. Is he a guy that Detroit does think, like was Schroeder hey, Sasser's not ready this year and we're winning, so let's go get Dennis Schroeder and then we'll let him go and Sasser will be in that role next year? Or do they see Sasser as the 5th guard, the 11th player on your team that when somebody's injured or somebody gets in foul trouble or something like that, he's a really good option? And those guys are important, especially in the regular season. But the thing is, if they bring Schroeder back and they bring Beasley back and J.I. returns, the minutes and the availability for him is even less than what we're seeing right now. And so I am kind of interested to see. Our guy Steven Suggs, who's usually in the comments, has brought this up a lot in terms of, how many guys can you have in the rotation? Can you even bring all of these back depending on, what guys are going to want role-wise? So I think that's my thing with Sasser. I wanted to kind of shout out his play, but also mention I don't know what it means for his role moving forward.
Yeah, and I think getting Schroeder, it was an acknowledgement that Sass is probably better off when he doesn't have to be tasked with running the offense, but he can just kind of go out and play free and, get to his spots. And that's where he's best. I think going forward, that's probably where you want to keep him, unless he starts to, take on more of a playmaking responsibility. But his role is important, and I think his role is still worth investing in. Those first 2 games Cade missed against the Pelicans and the Spurs, Sasser had 20 points against the Pelicans. He had a lot of clutch shots late. The Pels had a really hot night from 3, and it was just one of those games. It shouldn't have been a competitive game at all, but they were just so hot from 3. It was just one of those nights, right? It was like the Pistons were doing anything wrong, but Sass really came in, and sometimes you just need a bucket, and that's what he did. And then they defeated the Spurs, I think by 26 the next day. He had 27 points, 9 for 12 overall, another win. So that's still important. As much as the game has changed, there's still value in just having the guy who just come in and get you a bucket when you're a little bit shorthanded, and that's what you need. So that's his role. I think that's where he's best. Obviously they're pretty heavy at guard, but like he's still showing that there's a role for him, in times like this.
I agree. And I do think that they should prioritize his role. I do think it's important. Obviously, they have his right. They drafted him in the first round, so they can control that. It just, you wonder if Sasser will be happy with that and all of that. So let's get to some of these questions. Again, we got 10 minutes or so here left. And then the crazy thing is, the next time we're recording, we get to do our first playoff preview episode. So that this will be fascinating, because usually this episode is like, man, we got 3 games left, and then we got to start talking off season. We got to start talking mock drafts and free agents and all of that stuff. The lottery, like Pistons fans don't even have to watch the lottery this year. No jokes about falling to 5 this season. So it's really exciting. And once we know who they're going to match up with, I think we'll be able to be successful in lining up some really cool guests to bring on. Our guy, YouTube user, I personally think perimeter defenders not named Ausar are a serious issue, have been all season. I like Dennis from an effort standpoint, but he is small. Thoughts on that, just in terms of matching up with perimeter players? I mean, we've talked about these matchups. What if you get the Pacers and you have to match up with Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Benedict Mathurin? Those guys can't put Ausar on all of them, can't play Schroeder all the minutes. I hope and think that we'll see Cade bump up his on-ball point of attack defense. I do worry about Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw against Sacramento that, the perimeter defense can be a weakness for this team. And, they're probably a little bit stronger in the front court than they are with their guards. And, I do think Beasley and THJ try. It's not like a lack of effort. It's just, it's just tough when, teams have so many perimeter threats who can get it going like Sacramento had. So, I would say it's probably one of the bigger issues on this team, and teams know that they can kind of exploit that, right? I also think that you can rectify that a bit. Again, you could put Cade on some of those matchups and he can handle himself. I think you could play Ron a little bit more and trust that he can handle some of those matchups. You have things you can do to kind of make up that gap. Schroeder, he's capable. He's a little bit small, but he always seems to be in the right place. He's just a pest, and that pays off. So there are things they can do to adjust, rotation wise. I think there's probably some give and take between prioritizing defense and still being able to knock down shots because, of course, Ron and Ausar are not outside shooters. So yeah, I think we see that that's an area that teams can exploit. How do you feel about it, Bryce?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm really interested, Omari, is are the Pistons going to do something about teams just running a simple action to switch Ausar off their best player? So this again is why I personally, for data collection, want them to play the Knicks. Because if I'm the Knicks and Ausar Thompson is on Jalen Brunson, I'm going to start every possession by screening Ausar with whoever Cade is guarding to wear Cade down. Or if I want to attack Malik Beasley or Tim Hardaway Jr. or whoever, I will take their guy and set the screen. I think Detroit has to have, and I'm not critiquing them for not doing it in the regular season, they have to have a scheme where in those situations, it's not an auto switch. They hedge it, Ausar navigates, whatever it is. Teams can't simply run a simple ball screen to get Ausar off of their best player, especially in high leverage moments, and just take him out of the play and then let them attack, and then you run a pick and roll or pick and pop with Brunson and Cat versus now it's Beasley and Jalen Duren as opposed to Ausar and Jalen Duren. So that's one thing I'm really looking forward to. The other thing is I've been very critical of the Pistons off-ball defense on the perimeter all season long. They miscommunicate switches. Schroeder actually has not been helpful with this. He gets lost off-ball a lot. So I'm kind of interested to see if the off-ball defense can grow a little bit as well. Ben asked, Omari, after the season, will you get an opportunity to talk with Fred Vincent and get to ask him about how Ausar and Holland are progressing with their outside shooting?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to talk to Fred. It's just a matter of him being made available. But I mean, not even till after the season, we could talk to him during the playoffs. That would be great. So, at some point, we'd love for that to happen. That's definitely something that I know fans are interested in. I'm
really interested to see what happens next season. I've said this since Fred Vincent got hired. I wasn't expecting him to make a difference in one offseason where this year Ausar could shoot and Ron and everybody made huge jumps. I am, kind of interested in I guess, expecting to see those results and improvements next season. So I think it will be a big offseason, obviously, for all of those guys, but for Fred Vincent as well. Darius Harris says, I think the priority of this offseason is a true second scorer next to Cade and size at the 4 beyond Tobias. Yeah, we talked about that second scoring option and this with Tobias a little bit earlier, Omari. I don't know if that happens this offseason. Tobias under contract for one more year. I don't think you move off of him unless you have like a big name free agent you can go get. And I would be okay just waiting to see another year of J.I. Holland, I suppose even Ausar, to see if they're going to be able to step into those level of shoes.
Yeah, at minimum, I would wait till the trade deadline to make that type of swing. Like, you just got here. Like, I don't think you need to immediately try and go and get that number 2. Like, if it's the NFL, yeah, you do everything possible because windows are slim. Like, in the NBA, you have some leeway, especially when guys are young, to just got to add to the core, make adjustments here and there, but allow your players to develop and, see what they can grow into. Like, OKC has been patient. Like, they, allowed their guys to grow. They kept adding picks and, you could go and get Isaiah Hartenstein or Alex Caruso when that time comes, but those are still high-level role guys. Like, they just allowed Shea and Jalen Williams and, their other guys to grow into their roles. Like, Memphis, like, I know they've had some turmoil, as of late, but you still look at how they've built and, like, they've been, in the playoff mix every year despite the injuries, and they've just allowed Jaren and John, Desmond Bane, and a lot of their guys to grow. And they've done a great job of player development. Like Jalen Wills, maybe top 3 in Rookie of the Year voting this season. Like Scottie Pippen Jr. is turning it into something for him. And like, you can stack assets, develop, and you still always have that option to make a swing later. Like, those opportunities don't disappear, especially when you're young and you have your draft picks and financial flexibility. So, yeah, like, I think this offseason, like, you could very easily just, bring back Dennis Schroeder, bring back THJ, maybe you extend Duren and Ivy, maybe you punt that to next season. But, like, Jaden Ivey essentially could be your offseason signing, and you just run it back next season to see where you are. I don't think you need to cash in your assets before you have to.
I agree. I would wait. I think, people have talked about when you get a number 1 pick, the time clock immediately starts, and with Cade and all of that. I think you showed Cade enough this year and there was enough success that you bought yourself some time to figure things out. I would assume he would be understanding of that. They got the most important thing, which is an all NBA level player in Cade Cunningham. Your number 1 pick so far this season, like, kind of is living up to what you want from your number 1 pick. It'd be love to see him take even another jump, but he's really, really good. I would wait and see what you can get from these young players, like you said, before you start trading assets that you're just now getting back access to. Caleb says, question, do you think our recent dip in performance could be related to the increased minutes for the players with some of the injuries, absences? I will just give you this stat real quick, Omari. Detroit has 5 players this year that have totaled 1,960 minutes. That would be Cade Cunningham, Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jalen Duren. There are 88 players in the NBA this season that have played at least 1,960 minutes or more, and Detroit does have 5 of them. I will say all of those guys have played at least 68 games. Cade's is actually the lowest, so he's taken on quite the... But like, Tobias did it in 70. Malik has done it in almost 79 or almost 80 games. He's on track to play all 82. It's not like the minutes per game seems to be crazy outside of the 35 a game for Cade.
Yeah, like, I would say, they're probably in line with other workloads across the league. Like, I would say some of that's just injuries and absences, but also, like, we knew going into the last stretch that it would be tough just because they had a pretty difficult schedule, especially relative to, the Bucks and the Pacers. Like, the Bucks are playing the Pelicans twice, in like the last 5 games. Like, the Pistons haven't had that luxury. So to me, it's just a result of that. Like, you had tough games, you were on the road for a bit, and you were without Cade for 6 games, you were without Tobias, you had the suspensions. Like, that's a lot to disrupt a team over a 2-week span. So I see it as that's about minutes and more just about the rigors of the season, just kind of biting them over these last 2 weeks. But teams ebb and flow over the course of the season. Sometimes that ebb, is at the very end of the season. But, I don't think a week and a half, 2-week blip is anything to freak out about.
Yeah, I'll just say, so like Jalen Duren is one of those players I mentioned. He only averages 26 minutes a game. There are 150 players in the league almost that average 26 minutes a game. So that's not really an outlier with him. Even like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Beasley, I think maybe there's an art, Harris played 30, but Harris has always been a high minutes guy. Like his whole career. I mean, 32 that he's averaging this year is the lowest since, guess when, Omari? Back when he was in Detroit, actually. So I don't think it's something these guys aren't used to. I understand the question, but I think, as you said, it's just a weird stretch right now where they've locked into the playoffs. It's 5 or 6. It's a long season, all of that. We'll get to talk more about this later, but in a week. But Caleb says, who guards Giannis in the Bucks matchup? Will we see the return of Stu and Duren front court, or will it be Tech, assuming Tobias is out?
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to see, because I think Isaiah Stewart is like the best matchup for Giannis, just from a pure physicality standpoint.
I agree.
Especially if like part of that depends on how much Brook Lopez plays and if he plays. If you're starting them together, then like arguably I could see that being a reason to start JD and Isaiah Stewart together, just because like I just think these two is far more equipped to handle that matchup than Ausar Thompson is, or whoever else you would put up there. So I'm curious to see. Again, it's like the last 2 games of the season, so I would even be shocked if Giannis is rested for one of those games if the standings are already pretty set. But like I think Stu's shown over the past few seasons that he's their best option.
Yeah, it's hard in this starting lineup. If you have Tobias, you kind of have 2 options. We've seen Detroit do it both ways, where you start Tobias on Giannis, Duren on Lopez, or you can do it the other way where you actually start Duren on Giannis, and then that allows Tobias to defend the floor stretching Lopez. Here's the thing. Let's say Tobias is out and you are starting Ausar. I think you could get away. Like, I would test the Bucks. Like, in that scenario, I'd put Duren on Giannis, and you could put Ausar on Lopez and say, like, really? Are you going to, like, post up Lopez? Like, great. But then you're wasting Ausar on Brook Lopez as opposed to somebody else, right? And so, like, that's where the Ausar at the 4 thing, like, gets really, really interesting. So, I don't know. I don't think they would start Stu and Duren. Maybe they would. How fascinating would that be? After all of the Stu at the 4 stuff, they make the playoff. There is a fraction of the fan base that would go crazy if this is what happened, but I don't know. Like, there's got to be an argument for it, right? To just go Cade, THJ, Ausar, Stu, Duren against the Bucks. There's got to be an argument for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially with Stu shooting the 3 a little bit more over the last month. Like, if there's a matchup where you start both of them together, like I think that's the one for sure. Like, that's the only way you're going to match up with that physicality that they have. Like, especially with Tobias out. Like, yeah, I mean, you're just not equipped to do it. You've got to, like, whether it's Stu or Paul Reed, somebody's got to play out of position and make it work in that matchup, I think.
Well, because the other thing is they start Kuzma as well, and so even then, like, I guess you could put. There just isn't a matchup. So if it's not Tobias, I don't think you can start Ausar at the 4 against the Bucks. And I guess we might get a little bit of a preview in the last 2 games, but I would assume if it's, I don't know. It'll be interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I guess this wouldn't be the playoff series. This would just be the last 2 games. So it would be fun for a playoff series. Yeah, so yeah, I misspoke there. I'm sorry. This wouldn't be the playoff series. This would just be down the stretch of the last 2 games. My apologies, everybody. Okay, Steven Suggs, last questions. In the offseason, are you guys going to have an episode talking about potential trades? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure once we get into the offseason, this has been the nice thing, though, is we haven't had to think about the offseason. We haven't even started the brainstorming of what we're going to talk about. Because, again, next recording, we'll be previewing playoff games. We'll get at least a couple episodes out of that, and then we can start getting into Omari will start diving into 2nd-round draft picks, I'm sure. And yeah. I think what will be fun is, I thought about this the other day, is kind of playing an either or of like options with the salary cap. Okay, if you want to keep Malik Beasley, but not this player, or would you rather keep this guy, Schroeder, but not this player? Like, I think that's where it'll be fun in terms of just kind of those mechanisms of the salary cap, because Detroit is in such a unique situation.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a very conversation this offseason compared to past off seasons where, I think before there was always sort of a clamor for them to make a big move to get out of the basement. And I don't think that's going away for some people in the fan base. I still think people are like, they need to go get Book at all costs and kind of go in now. But like, I think very reasonably you could just say no trades, just figure out what to do with the half of the free agents you have, maybe address a positional weakness, and then just kind of keep it pushing. So to me, we'll do a trade episode, but I think also the larger debate is, do they need to do anything at all to that scale?
Yeah. Andrew says, yes, it's been great to not care about the draft. Not for me, Andrew. Not for me. I have a whole big board. I have all my notes, and I can't use it all on this podcast because we simply do not care. I was thinking the other day, how do I weasel a mock draft of, even if it's just the lottery, into the podcast after the season is over? Maybe we'll get to do that at least a little bit. It's been a mainstay. We've always done mock drafts on the pod or talking about prospects, but no Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, VJ Etchcom, Dylan Humper conversation this season. It's all playoff matchups, seedings, and it's been a whole lot of fun. Honestly, the other thing we'll get next episode is, we can really talk about the award stuff. I don't know when they actually come out. They probably won't be out at the time that we record, but
I think they come out. So that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up. I'll have a vote for All NBA too, and I believe the ballots will be released right after the season ends. So
yeah,
we'll also be able to kind of discuss that next week because the Pistons will be pretty well represented this season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I listened the other day. You get the ballot on Monday, or the ballot becomes open on Monday, because you got to make sure everybody plays their 65 and all of that. But yeah, I think that will be interesting. I know on Game Theory, we're doing our final iteration of it. And again, I will guarantee that Cade Cunningham is on my second team All-NBA. And I was listening to Hoop Collective the other day. It sounds like JB may have a little more of a push for Coach of the Year than what I thought, which is cool. And even Sam said the other day that it's probably Malik for Sixth Man of the Year. And I think, even though you and I don't agree, I think Cade's going to get most improved votes as well. I hear a lot of people say Cade and Evan Mobley. So that will be interesting also.
Yeah. And because of the year, I think timing kind of helps the Pistons too. Whereas the Cavs are having a historic season, but they've kind of faltered a little bit down the stretch. Meanwhile, the Pistons, the news cycle for them has kind of apexed in the last couple of weeks where they've clinched the playoffs and, tripled their win total and this and that. So, I think the coaching job that JB has done is kind of fresher in people's minds. So definitely curious to see how this shakes out over the next week. But one way or another, they will be getting a lot of votes.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see where people land and all of that. And yeah, I mean, the thing with JB is the argument of tripled their win total is a really easy one to say, as opposed to the Cavs, where you don't have that just easy narrative to spit out, without explaining a whole lot more. Tripled your win total. That's real simple and easy for people to back up. So it'll be fun. Our episodes are only going to get more enjoyable here coming up. I feel like have kind of just tried to navigate the end of this season with the content, Cade not playing, Tobias, whatever. There's no just getting through it come playoff time, O2. I'm excited for those episodes. And guys, be looking out for a playoff preview. If it's the Knicks, my guess is we'll have Andrew Claudio, maybe James Edwards if he would come on. Somebody is going to come on from the Knicks. If it's the Pacers, I'm praying that Caitlin Cooper will agree to come on and talk that with us. So we'll have something good for you guys no matter who it is. But we will see you soon. Thank you so much. Like, subscribe, share, etc. Read Omari on the Free Press. Go subscribe to the Motor City Hoops Substack. Listen to Wes and Blake on the Pin Down on Detroit Bad Boys YouTube. Omari, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.